Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, Thank you so much for joining our Res Request web series. Um, I am your host, Dando Begu. I am the Business Development Manager at Res Request. We're excited to have you join us. The Res Request web series are an opportunity for Res Request and our partners to upskill, enlighten, and empower our customers with different knowledge within the Res Request atmosphere that they may have not been privy to. Um, at the same time, we aim to facilitate conversations around industry standards, how to maneuver or implement or guide you within your standard operating procedures, and general tips and tricks available to you across our clients and their businesses. We have 4 episodes that we'll cover during the web series, and they'll be broken down into 3 principles. The first one is covering analytics, where we will be covering what is available, what data is available within your Res Request systems, our partner products, and just trends across Africa. Sales will be the next topic, or the next principle that we would cover, where we talk about how to improve your sales, marketing your business, and how to have better partner relations. And then we'll also cover principles around business efficiencies. So what tools, techniques, products, features are available within your Res Request system and partner products. So looking at today's topic is data-driven decisions in a rebooting market. This is our aim today, is to make sure that we help you make the right decisions, check whether or not whatever is currently driving your decision is the right way in which you should be looking at things, and whatever is restricting your decision is the right way to be making decisions, for you to be restricting your decisions. So we're going to identify new opportunities to hopefully turn leads into confirmations, spot ways to operate more efficiently, increase revenues, and have you have happier customers. This webinar will show you data analytics tools available to you, how to utilize those, and the information that they come with, and just really make you well-rounded within your business. Our guest panelists today will introduce you to Tourism Today, an application available to you to help you make decisions, and how to focus on industry trends, and focus efforts on pricing and your specials that you could have, and based on the industry as a whole. So, and then now I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. Our panelists today include our business data analytics team, along with I guess panelists Tom and Kate Imri, who are pioneers of the industry and data platform, Tourism Today. And so without any further delay, our first person on our screen here is Mike Coppinger. He's the director of Res Request Enterprise and co-founder, managing director and co-founder of Res Request Enterprise. With 21 years experience in this industry and travels to many of our client sites, Mike has gathered quite a lot of wild stories, and potentially he could write a book. And I think it's about time we convinced him to write this book, because he has so many stories. Sadly, today is not the day to look into those, but yeah, it is something that we need to look into at some point. Tom and Kate Imri are Pomeroy consultants. They are self-proclaimed Bush analytics enthusiasts, and all-round passionate about the tourism industry, and they like analyzing the industry's data. This passion was then born out by their first child, which is Res Insights. Res Insights is a cloud-based solution that offers guided insights into what has made your business a success, how to keep it trending upwards. Res Insights promises to mature your organization's approach to analytics and with data and get you great results. And then lastly, but definitely never least, is Albert Smith, ResRequest business analyst. He is responsible for implementing new systems, new client systems, and consulting with existing clients on their standard operating procedures, what interfaces are available to them, and implementing those interfaces and bettering our clients' overall efficiencies. And so we're going to move on to what do we need to know today? What are we trying to cover today? And basically today, the whole discussion will be based around these three topics or categories. One is going to be identifying your performance matrix as a business owner. What booking trends are there and we can look into? And then as an industry as a whole, what industry activities is happening, what trends are happening, and we'll be looking at Tom to help us guide us in that regard. Performance matrix, and those help us also compare ourselves within the time range. Booking patterns, those also help us track our customer behaviors, and then industry activity, like I said, it's just looking at how well the broader industry is faring. I shall now transition to Albert, who's going to help us talk about what data is available within ResRequest. Over to you, Albert.
Thanks, Ntando. It's a privilege being here. So ResRequest contains virtually all the data that you need to assess your business performance. And these can be broadly broken down into two different categories, which are reservations and contacts. And then contacts can be further broken down into individuals and organizations. You can slice and dice this information to give you different levels of details and different angles of your business performance. If we look at a few examples, you can look at best performing properties according to revenue, or across all my properties, which were my best performing agents by group. And sometimes you may require some additional data that is not in ResRequest. Mike, can I ask you to elaborate a bit on this point?
Thanks, Albert, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm feeling a little bit jittery just at the moment because just before we started this webinar, I adjusted the position of my desk slightly, and a little night adder slithered out and has curled up under the bookcase next to me here. And, you know, for Tom and Kate, that's actually just a normal day at the office. But for a city slicker like me, it's a little bit concerning. But
absolutely
anyway,
fantastic. That is super, super fantastic. And that is typical Mike. I was just saying, you have the world's best stories, and here they are landing upon us.
Okay, well, anyway, I'll try and focus on the question at hand. Albert, you've just, as you've said, you've described that the main repository of data available to us to understand how business is going is contained within the ResRequest database itself. But just to think, we need to just step back a little bit and look at how we approach the design of ResRequest. With any system, you're continually assessing a line of how far do you want to go. We've focused on sales and customer relationship management information. That's what ResRequest is designed to do. And we've got a huge store of data around those two topics. But you can always push the envelope and get involved in other areas, and somewhere you draw the line. So for example, when it comes to accounting, we take the data so far, and then we get to a point where we feel, okay, there are specialist accounting systems like Xero and Sage, etc., that people want to use. So we interface into those, and we don't have that data contained within ResRequest. So what that means is that you You've got the essence of all of your sales information contained within ResRequest, but there is some data outside of our system which you may want to report on. And that's one of the advantages of the Res Insight product, is that you can actually get to that sort of data. And then there's also the ability to look at aggregated industry data, and we'll go into that a little bit later on as well. But just to reaffirm, the primary source of the data that you require in order to make your business decisions is actually contained within your own ResRequest system.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And yeah, one of the things that I always tell our sales prospects whenever I do a sales demo is ResRequest is just utterly obsessed with data. We have a wide range of it, and I'm not going to go and take Albert's shine here, but Albert, can you tell us what data is available within ResRequest?
Thanks, Ntando. No, definitely. I'd love to chat to you guys a little bit about dashboards. So within ResRequest, we have these insightful dashboards for all your needs. These dashboards have done the thinking for you and present you with a summary of the most important information. So we have these three categories of dashboards at the moment. And looking at the first one, it's called reservations management. And within this, you can see who's traveling, who's paid, and who is your reservations champion. We've got a sales overview dashboard that shows you your financial trends and comparisons. And last but definitely not least is your product usage dashboard. And this shows you to what extent you are taking advantage of your ResRequest capabilities. However, it obviously gets more exciting than that. So I'm going to ask Mike to elaborate a little bit more on the reporting capabilities within the ResRequest system.
Sure, Albert. Yeah, the dashboards are fantastic for giving a very quick overview of really salient information. And that's necessary because ResRequest is a vast repository of data. Every one of your reservations is recorded there. Every contact that you've interacted with, whether it's a guest, an agent, a travel consultant, their details are in the system. So the challenge we faced is transforming that abundance of data into synthesized, useful information. And we've also got to just take into account the fact that ResRequest was designed from the bottom up to thoroughly cater for the requirements of having multiple companies in your system, multiple properties, multiple folios or invoices attached to a reservation, multiple currencies. So we didn't want to approach it and say, here are a couple of stock standard reports. We've rather taken the approach of building a reporting framework that enables you to tailor your reporting to match your particular requirements. So, for example, you can filter out certain data, like you might say, okay, I only want to look at the data from that huge pool of data. I just want that which relates to a specific property. Or you may want to look at the data across the full spectrum of your system and summarize performance per agent and perhaps sort the performance by bed nights or revenue or something. So there's a lot of customization that you can perform on your own. You can build your own reports, and then when you find particular structures that work for you, you can save those reports for future use. So a couple of key considerations when approaching the reporting functionality of ResRequest is that, first of all, you've got to be clear on what you're looking for. And because, as I said, there's an unlimited sort of realm of data out there, you've got to decide what business decision you're trying to make and then identify the correct report or the most appropriate report to extract the data and transform it into the information that you require. And another key thing is the quality of your data. If you want to get meaningful information out of it at the end, then the input data has got to be managed. It's got to be clear, and the quality's got to be good. For example, what's really important is to manage your agents database. If you've got the same agent entered into your system 3 or 4 times, perhaps with the name spelled slightly different, that's going to skew and compromise the quality of information that you can pull out of the system. So it's important to have standards in place and operating procedures to utilize features in the system, such as checks for duplicate contacts, and to be able to perform the cleanup functions that are there to consolidate contacts when necessary. Similarly, another point which would really influence your ability to get data out of or information out of the system is whether you build up a guest database. You don't have to record the names of all your guests in the system, but you have that option. And if you do, that gives you a whole wealth of information about your actual guests who are traveling to your properties, and also adds another dimension to the nationality reporting that you can do. And that's really, the profile of that has risen during COVID times, in that you want to know where people are traveling from. And for example, in ResRequest, you've got a number of layers of nationality. You can record the country of domicile of the agent that you're dealing with. You can record on a reservation the country from which the reservation was sourced. And for individual guests, you can record for the guest both their country of residence and their citizenship. So you've got to understand how you want to utilize that kind of data and put the procedures in place to make sure that you're capturing it. And we have found that the people who manage their data and have their procedures defined are often the ones who end up being, from a business perspective, the top performers. So just to recap on that reporting thing, then, to be clear on what it is that you want to get out of the system so that you use the right reports. And secondly, just be sure that you're putting good quality data into the system. And if you require assistance and guidance on any of those points, our call center is always available to help you, and you can contact support at ResRequest. So yeah, that's it on the reporting side.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Just so for our audience who's listening to us, if you do have any questions, please feel free to post them. We'll answer them as we continue along here. But going back to what you're talking about, Mike, yes, it is quite true that ResRequest has a lot of reporting abilities, both, as Albert mentioned, within dashboards, static dashboards, and our ResRequest reports. But, you do get those few people in the world who are just like us, are data junkies, and they possibly might want to extract the data into an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet, and so that they can utilize it for other means. Is our data exportable, and what with that can we do with it?
Yeah, it is, Ntando. From all of our reports, you have the option of exporting the data to CSV or into a spreadsheet format. So that is useful if you're wanting to go and do some additional calculations on those outputs or add something else to it. So that in itself is very useful. But we are now venturing into the realm of Tom and Kate's firstborn, ResInsight, which has got a specific capability of being able to combine data from different systems. So take your ResRequest data plus data from something like your accounting system and put them together. But it can do a whole lot more than that. And perhaps, Tom, you'd be better positioned to delve a little bit more into the capabilities of ResInsight.
Thank you very much, Mike. I've been watching you carefully, and I've noticed that you haven't had a look down at your feet to ascertain whether that's maybe not a slightly more venomous snake than you thought. But so you're doing well there. Listen, thanks, and listening in on that. And you know, you've both been chatting about the array of reporting that's available. You know, I'm continuously reminded of just how good the reporting out of ResRequest is. So it's a super strength that you guys have, and we work with many teams who've worked for many years with the data that's in there, and it's superb. It's awesome. I guess by way of sort of broad introduction to Res Insight, it's important to note that Kate and I are uniquely spoilt in that we are given access to entire clients' databases, and you know that's important because it allows us the opportunity to recreate and restructure all of the client's data in a best in its class business intelligence tool, which is called ClickView. And some of you might be familiar with ClickView. Some of you might even work with ClickView. It's a fantastic tool. It's used by 50,000 companies across the planet, some as big as the NHS and stuff like that. But by taking an entire database and restructuring it in ClickView, there are a number of advantages we get, and it really does lift your reporting to an entirely different landscape. The first advantage is that we're able to mine all of your data. It gives us the opportunity to take a really high altitude sort of view of your data, which allows us to help you identify where your data is lacking, where your data is bad, and we're able to flag areas that need attention and cleaning up. Secondly, by having access to the whole database, we're able to enhance and enrich the reporting that's obviously available in ResRequest already, but we're also able to put it into a suite which really shortens the turnaround times and the hard graft that a lot of teams experience when it comes to working in things like Excel and Google Sheets. We're also not adverse to recreating reports that teams have already, but the idea is that when you interact with Res Insight and you're looking for a report, it should be a simple case of logging online and a couple of clicks, and 15, 20 seconds later, you've got the reports that you need. Additionally, and it's key because we talk about business intelligence, it's ClickView is a business intelligence tool, and Res Insight is really designed to present your data in a way that optimizes business decision making. We're there to give you the tool that will highlight opportunities, but also to expose the potential sort of revenue or midnight potholes that might be sort of lurking in the data somewhere way ahead. And we achieve this by actually remodeling your data so that we can splice, dice, segment, filter your data over absolutely any dimension. Basically, if it lives inside ResRequest, we can find it and use that as a sort of a dimension for doing that. And with that, you've got this incredible ability to explore your data and to work out what's possible. And you've mentioned it already, Mike. There's by having your data in this external tool like ClickView, we've got the ability to connect to multiple disparate sources as well. It's not unusual for Res Insight to pull a client's budgets in from Google Sheets, or to overlay ResRequest data with a tour operator system, or to connect to an accounting system like Sun or Xero. So there are many sort of opportunities around that as well. But what it essentially does is it allows us to use different data sources to create quite an incredible and consolidated business intelligence tool. I guess probably the last thing I really want to say about Res Insight is that it's relatively simple to use. We've put it up into the cloud. Having put many clients on it, it's really easy to deploy. We can get it up and running within a matter of days. And we've had quite a lot of experience, especially for those that are possibly intimidated by the complexity of their systems. We've had a lot of experience with working with companies that have multiple currencies across multiple different countries, and we'd like to think that over the last sort of 4 years that we've made quite a lot of impact across Africa to many different teams out there. And having said that, we'd certainly love to take any questions on Res Insight, how it's available, a little bit more about it. And if anybody would love a demonstration, we'd certainly love to give them the time to take them through it.
Fantastic. That's awesome, Tom. So a picture is really very much being drawn here on just the different abilities on which to collect the data. So we know we can collect the data within Res Request, within our dashboards and our reporting functionality. We also know that we can also look at the analyze the data using Res Insight. So we are getting as an audience a good picture of where are the different data sets and data inputs that we have. But once you have the data, you also kind of need to know what to do with it. What you need to be able to make business decisions on the data. It's irrelevant if you just look at the data and then it doesn't really help you much. I was about to continue here, but I do see a message and a question is coming through, and I think it's probably more related to our previous segment. So before I go on here, let me just answer Leanne Dawkins. I hope I did not mispronounce your name. Ask, how does the POP-EI compliance feature? How does the POP-EI compliance feature within this data sets through Res Request dashboards and Res Insights? I think, Tom, you can take it on a Res Insights perspective.
Sure. So, Leanne, thanks for the question, and that is a really good question. And you think POP-EI wouldn't have snuck up on it as fast as it did, given that we had a lockdown and a lot of time to think about it. So, firstly, just to address POP-EI, we got very nervous about it because, along with Res Request, we are very conscious of data and data security. So that's the one thing. A lot of our systems and our safeguards are designed to make sure that everybody's data is safe. The second thing is to note is that, to be honest, we don't really cross a lot of the boundaries with POP-EI. There are a few clients that we work with where we actively work through their CRM data and measure sort of lead funnels from the internet against who's arrived in their system. But for the most part, Res Insight is really designed around being an analytical and a reporting tool on some of the key metrics that everybody's familiar with, like lead times and materializations and occupancies and stuff like that. So we don't really operate on that, to that extent in data that would fall foul of POP-EI. And before that as well, we've always aligned ourselves with the General Data Protection Act that exists within the European Union. We've always been aligned with that. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it definitely does, Tom. So in summary, the data that you're looking at is not really customer-centric. Our customers customer-centric. You do have those touch points now and again, and where that is concerned, you have taken the right measures and in place. But more or less, your data is within how does a business better themselves, as we're about to talk here with occupancies and all those things. So the data doesn't really go towards POP-EI. That's perfect. Mike, do you want to say how we handle it today, Res Request?
Just much the same as Tom's response there, is that our servers are well protected. We don't distribute the data anywhere. It's under the control of our clients. I guess where there could be questions later on, and I'll just preempt that now, is that we're going to talk about a facility we have for aggregating client data to get an industry view. And when we do that, we strip out all kinds of identification, property names, no personal information is shared at all. So there aren't any situations in which through either Res Request, Res Insight, or the Tourism Today that we're going to speak about, where we're actually making any personal information accessible to any unauthorized parties.
Yeah, and just to also add on to that, we obviously do have on the Res Request side of things a lot of partners. We have our Res Connect program, and with those, we also get our Res Connect partners to sign NDAs to make sure that they cover themselves and don't just distribute the data, our clients' data. And obviously, when we do also let our clients know that for their betterment of using Res Request, we will share their information with such partners as our tour operating partners to help them sell further. And we haven't really come across any client that has anything negative about that. They appreciate the business use case for that. So I think we are definitely covered within where Poppy comes in. Okay, moving back to our topic. Thanks, Leanne, for your question. Moving back to our topic. So as I was saying that we have now a good picture of the different data sets, the different data inputs that we have where Res Request and Res Insights are concerned and what the abilities are. But now we need to be able to measure ourselves and see how we can use that information and data for the betterment of our businesses. So whether we are reservationists, sales teams, or business owners, we need to know are the different performance metrics that can help measure our business performance. So we need to look at occupancy, and that could help us define our sales strategies as an example. Maybe look at and also look at financial performance to budget accordingly using tools like forecast and age analysis. And then we look at our conversion rates, which tell us depending on the different reservation stats, where our business is standing currently. So I will move on to Albert to just then talk us through these different points.
Thanks, Ntando. Yeah, no, definitely a very interesting topic this. So that's actually a great question. Looking at occupancy first, it all depends on how the hotelier evaluates their occupancy. So if we look at occupancies, you might measure your occupants in either bed nights or room nights. You may want to compare performance over different periods and track trends. You need to ensure that you use your block room functionality to ensure correct displacement of your sales performance in relation to the number of rooms available. What does that mean? Let's take it for an example. Using COVID as an example, when you block off your rooms correctly, the system will display the performance in selling the rooms available. However, the absolute number of bed nights sold will still give you a comparison of volume performance, which is obviously very interesting that everybody should know. Looking at the financial performance matrix, you can assess your financial performance in absolute terms of yield or RevPAR. You need to consider whether looking at your financial performance, are these based on including or excluding your taxes and levies. Your financial figures will be influenced by whether you include or exclude complimentaries, fam trips, and or even day visitors. When reporting, it's obviously very vital to split out your currencies to report in those currencies individually. And then obviously, as Mike mentioned earlier, it's very important to either report at a per day level or at a folio level. Now, all Res Request reports can be generated in either at a per day level or at a folio basis. And an example of this would be when a reservation is traveling between the 28th of September and then departing on the 3rd of October. This revenue can be split between the months or can be allocated fully to the month that the folio is being invoiced in. That's obviously a vital point to assess your financial performance within your company. And last but definitely not least, looking at your conversion ratios, which we'll touch on a bit later. But that's basically managing your statuses. And in order to track the conversions of your inquiries into confirmed bookings effectively, we need to make sure there's a procedure set in place for managing these booking statuses. And within Res Request, we've got quotation, provisional, confirmed, cancelled, and waitlisted. And Tando, I hope that all makes sense.
It definitely does, Albert. Yeah, you're highlighting that there are different ways to look and gauge as a business owner where I stand at any particular time. And more or less, some of these we can have some sort of control over. But then comes a point where we go to booking patterns, which is really completely dependent on the customer behavior and what the customer chooses to do. And obviously, COVID has just put a huge spanner in the works where that is concerned, because where people used to be booking months in advance and making sure those bookings stay the same without much changes, they're changing the bookings quite regularly. I'm actually a huge culprit of that, where when I was planning for a holiday with family last year, I changed 3 or 4 times because there's so many unknowns. And so there's a lot to grapple with now where booking patterns are concerned, because we now have different measurements for lead times. Travel routes are becoming peculiar and how our clients choose to get to us and where they come from, depending on a lot of things. So I'll pass on to you, Mike, just to let us know what is it that's happening right now with booking patterns.
Thanks, Ntando. Well, I guess first things first, I'd just like to report I've still got 10 toes, so that's a positive. And yeah, as Albert said, it's really important to have metrics to assess how our businesses are doing, but it's equally important to have a finger on the pulse of how's the market behaving. Are customer behavior patterns changing or not? You know, and that's always relevant, but it's particularly relevant now, given the 18 months that we've been through, and there's been so much unpredictability and so much dynamism that, you know, to try and keep track of. We need to be able to keep a finger on things like, you know, are people booking through different channels? Are they tending to go direct, or more inclined to go direct, or favoring tour operators more, or going through OTAs? And I'm not going to answer any of those questions, because next week we've got some specialists on that topic, and I'd really urge you to be present then to get their input as they go in depth into that side of things. But you can, with your own res request system, assess quite a lot of that kind of information about where people are traveling from. And just a couple of, you know, I spoke earlier about the quality of data being so important. Just in addition to the points that I made earlier, it's worth being aware that on a res request reservation, you can specify where the reservation originated from. So if the booking is coming through a DMC, you have the ability to say, well, who was the source agent or the originating agent for that booking? And if you've said which country that originator is in, that just gives you a whole lot more analytical capability. You also have the ability to add a marketing tag to any booking, which you can set up those tags yourself, which is some sort of indication to you of how did this booking come about. So the originator would be giving you an actual originator agent, and the source would be giving you a marketing channel. So again, that's discipline applied in those areas affects the quality of information that you get out. But there are also these other factors, and lead time, that would be one of them. It's important to know, well, how far in advance are people booking? And traditionally, you know, I would have said, okay, we just have a look at when did they book or confirm their booking, and when are they arriving, work out the number of days between that and that's our lead time. But as Ntando's mentioned, there's been so much change over the past 18 months of bookings moving as guests and travelers assess when is an appropriate time to travel. that can play havoc with the information in the system. And Albert, I think you've had a lot of exposure to this topic in dealing with clients day in and day out, wrestling with exactly that, how to record these things most effectively in the system. Could you share a bit of your experience on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. Yeah, look, when COVID hit, there was quite a few scenarios that came about that not all of us knew how to deal with, basically within the res request system, working with postponements, which are generally based on COVID, we have a field on your reservation for voucher that some clients use, and they add that into their standard operating procedures so that we know that is a deferred booking because of COVID, and other clients would use it in their reservation name. And obviously with, as Mike mentioned earlier, with the strong reporting capabilities of res request, we can report on those within the system. And I mean, now we're 2 years down the line, clients are reporting on their deferred bookings because of COVID. And you can obviously see that revenue filtering through, that is not all lost, but actually deferred to a different year in the future. I hope that makes sense, Mike.
Sure, thanks, Albert. But that also obviously the recognition of the fact that these movements are taking place affects the way that we analyze data, and that's posed a challenge for you as well, Tom. How have you gone about handling that? Because one of the metrics that you report on through both Res Insight and Tourism Today is lead times. So how are you assessing those, and what observations have you made about what, are lead times changing or not at present?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mike. So I think when it came to lead times, certainly during lockdown, with Res Insight, we had to throw the book out the window, if you like. I mean, traditionally, we would do a lot of reporting on lead times. Well, actually, several different kinds of lead times. We would often report on the amount of time between when a booking was recorded or created and when they confirmed, and then from there, from when somebody confirmed to when they would arrive, and those were the kind of the different lead times we did. But it became increasingly apparent, and we'll take September 2021 for an example. There'll be a lot of teams across Africa at the moment that are looking at their lead times for September 2021 and are seeing lead times of about sort of 450, 500, 550 days, which is clearly not a true reflection of what's going on. It's more an indication that bookings that were due to sort of arrive in maybe April 2020 and were created in 2019, in fact, are only just getting into the lodges now. So one of the things that we pivoted on quite quickly was to encourage our different clients to rather look at lead times in terms of actual booking activity now. So if you want to assess lead times, forget about who's just arrived into your lodge. Rather look at what your res teams have created in the last month or the last 60 days or the last 90 days, and it's going to arrive. And that gives you a much stronger indication of what kind of lead times are out there. And I'm guessing, as you asked, in terms of looking at it across the board, and with that sort of picture in mind, we've certainly seen across Africa lead times have shortened by about 25, 26, 30%, somewhere around about there. And that's when we compare what was happening in 2018 for the month of August to the month of August in 2021. And so those are the kind of shortenings we are seeing. Sorry, Mike, did that answer the questions? I think we were talking about lead times.
Yeah, that did, Tom. That is interesting. I think that it kind of resonates that the lead time has shortened. People are not wanting to commit too far in advance. They want to see how the land lies. And then in terms of other information that you might be able to share a few nuggets of wisdom with us is in terms of group composition. Are people traveling in smaller or bigger groups? Are they staying for longer or shorter? Are there any discernible changes in the split between adults and children in a group? Are people more inclined to stay at one property, or are they keen to string circuits together, go to a few properties? Is there anything that's jumped out in those sort of areas from the data that you've been looking at?
So Mike, obviously that's a lot of the stuff that we sort of publish anonymously across all of our different participating vendors on tourism today, and there are actually some really interesting sort of statistics that come out of that, and we suggested we're going to talk about it. Actually, I went on and I got a little bit overwhelmed because I wasn't quite sure, where to begin with that. So one of the first things, when looking at the stats is where to go. So we, so I think Kate and I, when we sat down, we looked at all of the bookings that were made in August 2018 and all of the bookings that were made in August 2021. And there were a couple of key things to note. The first is that the average group size has dropped by about sort of 15%. So the groups are a little bit smaller. And I think when I previously mentioned that to Kate and yourself, and it seemed to make a little bit of sense. Maybe much smaller sort of family units are traveling, or more sort of couples. It's that was there. We have noticed that the length of stay across the board seems to have increased, but that's looking at an average across the board. Certainly in East Africa, length of stay is roughly the same as it was in about August 2018, but in Southern Africa it's got a little bit longer. Definitely, so putting that together, you could broadly say that people are traveling in smaller groups and traveling for slightly longer. So that was that. We're also just some of the other sort of nuggets I pulled out when I was looking at the data. And we also try to assess a difference between a domestic market and an international market, because we know that in many countries over the last 18 months, the domestic market has been really what saved a lot of people. So up in Kenya and Tanzania, for example, we're still noticing that the lead times for the domestic bookings are under 4 months, sort of closer to about 3 months, whereas the international lead times at the moment are well over 6 months. Both Kenya and Tanzania, we've noticed that the internationals are staying slightly longer than the domestic bookings and are paying just about twice the rate that the domestic market is paying. But when we flip down and have a look at Southern Africa, there's domestic market again, it is in about that 3 month bracket when it comes to lead time, whereas the international market is the lead times are just over about 4 months. They're actually slightly shorter than East Africa, which is quite interesting. And looking at some of the rates as well in Southern Africa, differences between domestic and international markets, and in Botswana, the domestic market's paying about less than half of the international rate at the moment. South Africa, the domestic market are paying just over half the rate of the international market. And in Zimbabwe, the local domestic market's paying about 3/4 of what the internationals are paying. And then just to carry on with that, in terms of group sizes, and in South Africa and Zimbabwe at the moment, we're seeing an average of about 2.5 people for group amongst internationals, whereas with locals it's slightly larger. The average is just over 3. But what's really interesting is that in Botswana, that's actually reversed. The group sizes for internationals tends to be about 5, whereas the group size for domestic market tends to be about 3.5. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Tom. That certainly gives us a little bit to chew on. That's interesting stuff. So, Ntando, I think we'll go back to you.
Yeah, it is quite interesting indeed, just this conversations that we're having. And as we mentioned at the start, that our aim here is for everyone who is attending to be able to get some sort of nuggets that they can say, I got this from the Res Request webinar, and this is something that I was able to utilize within my business. So when you hear Tom talks about the different industry trends, you can possibly look at it within yourself and say, where do I fall in? What do I need to pivot? How do I pivot and utilize it better? And look at the different ways in which you could utilize this information for your own betterment. So now we're going to move on to tourism today, because we've basically covered how we look at information within Res Request, how we look at information within external systems, and what data is available, and what are performance metrics and booking patterns that are available to us. But I, as a business owner, have to be aware of what is happening at the industry. What's the impact of COVID throughout the industry? Am I the only one who's going through this dip, as we've just spoken about lead times and how drastically they've changed? And I think there, Tom, this is where you can help us just really understand, with your second board now, Tourism Today, what is it? What does it achieve? And what business use case does it have for our clients?
And Tando, thanks very much, and thank you for letting us shout out loud and proud about Tourism Today. So I think you mentioned it, what information was available, and right at the beginning of last year's lockdown, we sat down, we scratched our heads, and we wanted to publish something that would help owners of lodges or game reserves or hotels, to see a path to recovery. And we tried all sorts of different things. We were looking at trying to publish flight paths from Skyscanner on who could come from where and go where. But it very quickly became apparent that African hoteliers and lodge owners actually have limited access to the kind of statistics that hoteliers around the rest of the world rely on when it comes to making key business decisions. And look, there are a lot of reasons for that. but we felt, knowing that there wasn't this kind of benchmark sort of across the industry information, and with some of our relationships with some of the other leading PMS systems, as well as Res Request, that we could definitely get a collaboration going between everybody, and try and publish some stats that would allow people to better understand the trends and the driving forces behind tourism, particularly in Africa. So it was very much, the idea was to be in Africa, by Africa, for Africa. So we've just launched. It's up and running. We're busy rapidly expanding the number of hotels and properties that we cover. I think at the moment we're up to about 8,000 beds on a daily basis, and about 420 properties in 11 countries, 27 different areas. But like I said, we've just launched. Lots of fantastic vendors are on board. So we're really looking to expand those numbers quite dramatically. I think it's also key just to mention that we wanted to approach Tourism Today and this collaborative project slightly differently to the way that many, that are on this webinar might be familiar with statistics that come across sort of the industry. We definitely didn't want to send out questionnaires, because those tend to be quite subjective, and we certainly didn't want to rely on people sending us their statistics at the end of every month. We're very clear and firm in our minds that we wanted to connect directly with property management systems. We wanted to go and fetch the data. We wanted to basically to clean it and sense check it, scrub it, and then publish it in a very sexy and sort of convenient format. So it is dynamic, it is exciting. It's the whole process is managed by ClickView, and it's published in Power BI. Yeah, and the other things to obviously mention, and we spoke a little bit about it earlier when we came to POPI and GDPR and stuff. It's completely anonymous. The way that we collect the information steers very, very into very calm and safe waters when it comes to that. It's published weekly, and it's got all of the metrics that everybody is sort of familiar with. We look at occupancies in different areas. We track lead times, yield, revenue per available bed, traveling group size, materializations, daily rates, length of stay, number of bed nights, number of reservations. And the key thing is also is that we look at different source markets as well. So it's a case of, you know, if you're in a particular region and you want to know how everybody else is doing and where they are getting traction from certain source markets, that kind of information is published. So that's it. And then destinations, obviously, as well, we segment into different areas. And South Africa, for example, I think we've got 7 different areas within South Africa. So we don't just look at South Africa as a whole. You know, if you're in the Waterberg or the Eastern Cape or KZN or Western Cape or Greater Kruger, we've got stats and trends for you to look at and absorb. And then the other really key thing, I keep on thinking I say a lot of key things, but it is available on different tiers. And there is a light tier with a lot of information on it, which is completely free for any lodges and hotels who contribute their data. So it doesn't matter what vendor system that you come from. If you allow us to anonymously publish your data, well, then you've got an incredible tool to use to benchmark yourself against other people in your area and to better understand the trends that are driving tourism to our continent.
Tom, before we run out of time here, are you going to share with us any more little pearls of wisdom that you've picked out from tourism today? Before we
and when you said run out of time, Mike, is that because I got long-winded there? No. So what I thought I'd do, because I dropped a few nuggets sort of earlier from what we saw, is I thought we'd just talk about some source markets. And what I really wanted to do was look at the comparison between bookings that have been made in July this year and bookings that have been made in August this year. And one of the things that I noticed quite quickly was that the US is trending upwards. So we saw more bookings in August than we did in July from the US. The Benelux countries are also doing particularly well, and some of the countries around the Benelux, like Switzerland and Belgium and Germany, France, where we've seen a little bit of a pickup there. The UK, unfortunately, has gone backwards quite dramatically. So we saw about 40% less bookings from the UK than we did in July. Yeah, so that's briefly what's happening with source markets. We've also seen that Zimbabwe is starting to experience what we think is a strong recovery. Certainly, there's been a lot of gloom in Zimbabwe when you've looked at the statistics, but it definitely seems to have turned the corner as well, which is quite exciting.
Great, that's thank. No, not at all long-winded. I could listen to that stuff all day. It's fascinating. But thank you very much, Tom, for that. Yeah, and that tourism today certainly does reveal a wealth of information. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks indeed, Tom. It's interesting. 2 weeks ago, I was having a sales inquiry meeting. I was basically just about to do my spiel on who Raise Request is to this prospect lady that I was talking to, and you could tell in her eyes that she's so worried because they need a system because they're opening a new property, but they're also worrying about the financial implications about it all. And it's just like, it feels like it's the right time, but it's almost not. How do we go about this? And then she goes and asks me, do you know about the occupancies in my area? I feel so bad because I have forgotten her exact area where it was, but it wasn't any of our big national parks in South Africa, but it was just one of the smaller ones. And And so I was like, you know what? I think I do have a product that can help you. And then I quickly went into Tourism Today. I logged in, and surprisingly enough, we do actually cover that area in Tourism Today. And like I say, it's not Kruger National Park. It's not the bigger parks. It's a smaller park that I have forgotten the name, but it was just so fantastic to see. Within Tourism Today, I was able to tell the sales prospect, these are your occupancies. Sadly, they were tragic because they were sitting about 15%, 16% in these last 3 months in that particular region. But she was able to say, okay, cool, now I can understand how I can make this financial decision of possibly going with or not going with ResRequest. So it is a true and a tangible outlet of information that helps people really make business decisions. So that's, it was just really exciting that out of the blue, this woman comes in and I was like, oh, how do I help this woman? And I just literally went to Tourism Today and was able to help her from there. Yes, we have run out of time. It is 3 o'clock right now. So just for me to summarize and say goodbye to our audience, so we have, as you saw, we were basically covering what is possible within your ResRequest system, what is possible within the investment that you have made for your business management tool, ResRequest, to show you the different data sets that you have. How does it link in with other products that like ResInsights, which then show you what if scenarios? So if you made one change in this way, what could happen? And then also looking at then how do you as a business owner or look at yourself within the wider industry? And that's basically what our aim was, just to highlight these different things within ResRequest. And we're hoping that these nuggets of information that we've been relaying to as we've been talking have been helpful. But so we, as Mike mentioned earlier, any of the data that you input, which starts within ResRequest, is important to be cleaned. Make sure we've sanitized it, and we're not repeating guest names, agent names, and all those things, because whatever data you put in, as we all are aware, as whatever data will be able to get out. So some of the industry observation that we've also noted is that, and Tom has covered it, is the booming domestic travel. But what was even more pleasant to see from that was just how hoteliers and business owners and marketing teams then pivoted towards marketing better to the domestic markets. My Instagram is just booming with a lot of hoteliers marketing to me destinations that I wouldn't have thought of before, that I had not seen in 2019. But my Instagram is just filled with all these lovely lodges within South Africa that I'm always like, okay, maybe I'm so close to going, just financial constraints. But we look at those things and say, now we, as a domestic market, we now are able to have those experiences laid up upon just the people, because people have decreased their pricing. And then it's amazing to see this fight between SETSA and the UK and trying to get South Africa out of the red list. And so those are the different things we're also seeing in the industry, and we're excited to hopefully get an SA out of the red list, because it does give opportunities also not just to South Africa but to our neighboring countries. And then something else that we observed in the last year is just what happened in Zanzibar, where Zanzibar and the Russian government basically had an agreement, and on a weekly to monthly basis, there was just flights from Russia to Zanzibar, causing an unexpected wave of tourism, and then new trends ended up coming about, trends like revenge tourism and tourism nomads. And tourism nomads are people now, like Tom also mentioned earlier, people who are now saying, you know what, I can mix my business with my pleasure. and I will stay longer at my leisure place because I've realized that I can work from many locations. So thank you so much, panelists. It was definitely lovely to get all this information and just have our brains nudged a little and thinking about different information that we're not normally thinking about on a day-to-day basis. And so, yeah, it looks like there's no further questions. So I'm going to go ahead and close with our last slide. And so, yeah, as I've mentioned, there are 4 episodes that within the RegRequest web series. This was episode 1, and coming up is episode 2 next week, which is the markets transitioning. So therefore, it is time for you to revive your online sales strategy. We look forward to seeing you then. We'll be talking about OTAs, agents, how to prolong your sales cycles and convert your sales, and also looking at social media and how to utilize that for your selling purposes. Thank you very much, everybody, and that is a wrap. Cheers.
Thanks, Ntando. Thanks for everything. Cheers, everybody.
Bye.